We are back and better than ever. Okay, y'all, and I promise y'all, I'm going to be consistent. I had traveled to Ghana and I was there for a minute, and then when I came back, life was lifing, but I'm back. So today we are discussing something that actually took a while for me to understand, and not that it's complicated, but that it just was a little confusing. And we're gonna discuss the differences between an IAM role, the IAM user, and a policy. All of this is in AWS. So if you don't even know what AWS is, make sure you head back to my previous videos, look at my TikToks, look at my YouTube videos, so you have an understanding of what AWS is. But today we're talking about IAM users, roles, and policies. So let's get into it. So I don't even know which one I struggle with more, saying IAM versus IMA, or just understanding the differences between roles, policies, or users. And I was working on something where I was gonna automate the process of creating IAM users. And I was like, what is honestly the difference between a role and a user? And then I threw in policies in there. And I was like, in order for me to understand exactly what I'm automating, I need to truly understand what it is, how it's created manually, and understanding that, like, before you automate anything, you wanna make sure you understand what the process looks like manually. And before I understand the process of what it looks like manually, I need to know the difference. Like, what is the difference between creating a user in AWS, creating a role, and then creating a policy that I'm going to use? So let's break it down. So an IAM user is an actual person, somebody like me, Michelle. So it's somebody who would log in with a username, a password. It's somebody who actually is a user. So somebody who requires a username and password to get into the account. So that is what an IAM user actually is. So just always remember that a user is an actual person. So it's an actual developer, it's an actual tester. So user is people. So remember that users equal to people is an actual person that would be using that account. They would have a username and they would have a password. So now this is where it actually gets interesting. So an IAM role is not really a person, but think of it like a job hat. So it's really just like a set of permissions that can be assumed temporarily by either like a service or a user. Okay, so think of it like this. Normally I work in marketing, but for the day I need to be a project manager. Now you're not gonna go and change my whole title to project manager. You're not gonna go and then give me access to every single thing that a project manager has, but what you can do is create a role that has all the permissions a project manager would need. And then you would allow me to assume that role for the day. So an example is something like the EC2 instance. It can assume a role so that it has access to then read, let's say, files that are in your S3 bucket without needing your keys, without needing any of that. But it will just assume the role temporarily so it has access to read it. Like I said, when you are using a role, you're just assuming that job hat for the day. And now we get to policies. Now, a policy is honestly just a document. It's written in JSON or whatever. It's really just defining what actions are allowed or denied on a resource. I want you to think of a policy like a rule book. It's gonna say that this user can do actions X or Y on this resource. So it's telling you what can be done and not, basically. So if we look back at the project manager example, like, just because you're a project manager doesn't mean you need to be able to approve like $1 million on a budget. So let's say the policy says actually project manager can approve a budget of $10,000. So it's a rule book on what you actually can do even with that role. So remember that a policy is a JSON document that tells the user what they can and cannot do on the resource. Okay, I want to actually give you guys a bonus, because when I was looking at this automation, I was realizing, like, yeah, you can go and attach certain permissions and everything to each user individually, but then I realized that there's something called groups. So instead of just doing it individually to each person's actual user, there is something called IAM groups. And inside the groups, like, let's say somebody's a tester. All testers are gonna need most likely majority of the same permissions. So instead of me saying, oh, you need permissions for 1, 2, and 3, then going to the next tester, you need permissions for 1, 2, and 3. If I have a group called testers, I can then just say anybody who's added to this group has permissions 1, 2, and 3. So IAM groups is also another one. Okay, so let's make sure we got this. Users are people, roles is like a hat, and then policies is like a rule book, a document on what you can and cannot do. And think of groups as teams. So honestly, once I started thinking about it this way, it made way more sense to me. Like, I'm like, oh, okay, so a role is actually this, because what I used to actually really get confused on was users and roles. I don't know why, but it always confused me. So now it makes more sense, as users are people, roles are just things like a hat that I can put on for the day. And then remember that policies are documents that tell you like what the permissions, what you can and cannot do. And then groups are just the teams to make things a lot cleaner. Okay, so I hope this made sense. I hope it was helpful. And honestly, if you want me to break down how to create users, how to create policies, and how to create groups or roles, tools from the console or you want it from like the CLI, just let me know. It's actually very, very easy. But we can go over the manual way of doing it and then writing an automation, like using Terraform to actually do it for us, or just writing it from the CLI. We can do that too. But let me know in the comments what you want. And if there's any other AWS resource services that you guys want to want me to break down, let me know that too. Thank you once again, and we're back, y'all. So make sure you stay tuned for next week's video.